Hello everyone, welcome to Inside the Quality Awards. My name is Ralph Peterson, and in this video we are going to discuss question P1A5 of the Silver Quality Award application. This is the regulatory question, and it is one that really stumps a lot of people. So I'm going to walk you through exactly what the question is asking and exactly how to answer it. And for a bonus, I'm also going to show you how it impacts later in the application. It actually falls in with 6.1A at the silver level. So let's get right into it. P1A5. Here we go. Okay, here it is, P1A5 of the Silver Quality Award application. Keep in mind, this comes right from your bronze application. This was actually P1A6 of your bronze application. There is an additional requirement or an additional question. If you remember from bronze, there was actually 3 questions. Here at the silver, there's now 4 questions. Okay, so first let me point out that this is a what question. And if we were to draw an arrow from what to the last word, requirements, that is essentially the question we're answering. What are the requirements? That is the question. Okay, and now the next thing I want to point out is the word key. Of course, we've gone over this before, but key means most important. Now, for our purposes, this is super important for us to know because most important from a numbered point of view, oftentimes people are like, well, how many things do I need to write? How many things should I add? Well, the indicator is the word key. When they have the word key, we're looking for 1 to 5. I would say it's hard to have 5 most important things. 1 most important, 2 most important, 3 most important, sure. 4, okay, 5, maybe. 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. All right. Those are no longer the most important, right? So it's nice when we see the word key to keep in mind the number is between 1 and 5. 1 and 5 is a pretty good number for examples of identifiable things or requirements that you're going to be listing. Most important, I would say 1 to 5. Okay. Now, this all is one question, but I'm going to invite you to consider actually creating 4 answers because there's 4 parts to this question. So there's really 4 questions. Question number 1 is, what are your key applicable regulation requirements? Number 2 is, what are your key applicable accreditation requirements? Number 3, don't worry, I'm going to go through all of these. What are your key applicable certification requirements? And then number 4, this is the new one. What are your key applicable registration requirements? Actually, certifications or registration requirements, right? So the way that I answer this question, the way I'm going to show you how to answer this question is I'm going to create like a graph, a grid, and it's not going to make any sense at first, but it will eventually. So for best practices, pull out a piece of paper, grab yourself a pen, and do exactly what I'm doing. I'm going to divide this piece of paper into 4, like this. And then I'm going to make it into 12. So I have 12 squares here. Okay. I'm going to start in the middle. The middle is what I'm going to be putting in. The first question I'm going to be answering is the regulation. Regulations. Now, the thing that we automatically know is that regulations are by nature the rules. Meaning, you don't have a say in this, right? Like, it's not voluntary. They are the rules. You have to do it. These are things that you have to adhere to or follow, right? These are the things that you have to abide by. I'm just thinking of different words. Abide, adhere, follow. The things that you have to do. That's what regulations are. They are a necessity. They are the rules. They are the laws. You don't have a say. What we want to know about these regulations are, what are your requirements? What are the requirements? That is, in essence, the answer that we're looking for. We're looking to answer the question, what are your regulatory requirements? Meaning, what are the things that you have to adhere to, that you have to follow or abide by? What are those rules? Well, before we can answer that question, we have to go backwards and ask the very important who question. Who is regulating you? Who's regulating us? That's going to give us a clue as to what the requirements are. So first, let's identify a couple, again, because we're looking at key, most important, a couple of those agencies, those federal or state agencies, that are regulating senior care, whether it's long-term care, assisted living, IDDD. Okay. OSHA, CMS, Department of Health, the DOH. We'll just stick with 3 because, again, key. There's a lot of regulatory bodies, of course, but let's just stick with these 3 for just as an example. You can use whatever examples you want, of course. So now the question is, we know our organization, in fact, the way that I would even invite you to consider starting your answer is XYZ nursing home or assisted living center or our organization is required to follow or adhere or abide by the rules, these requirements. And the requirements are, well, it depends on who is asking. OSHA's requirements are that you create a safe environment for staff. CMS requirement, well, that's just one requirement. I'm just giving you one example, but there's 100 requirements that they have, of course. But we're looking for key. So we're looking for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 requirements for regulations. Okay. For CMS, I mean, there's staffing requirements, like staffing level requirements. There's quality requirements. There's care requirements, right? For the Department of Health, well, Department of Health, especially, I was going to say especially here in New York, but I know it's in every state. The requirements are inspection or survey requirements, inspection. There's reporting requirements, right? Like the way that I would think about or invite you to consider thinking about answering this question is we want to know what are your key applicable regulation requirements. The first thing I would want to do is I'd want to go, okay, what do we mean by regulations? Well, regulations are the rules, okay? They're non-voluntary. You have to do it, okay? And you have to adhere or abide or follow these rules. That's what we have to do. And I would identify who the rule makers are. And then I would go, oh, yeah, okay. So once I understand who the rule makers are, I'll go, oh, yeah, okay. These are their requirements. These are the things we have to do. And all of a sudden, you should be able to see, I just answered the question. I have the registration requirements, I have the who, and I have the actual requirements. So now I can go, XYZ nursing home is required to or abides by or follows the requirements of OSHA of creating a safe operating environment for staff, of CMS by creating a safe environment for clinical outcomes or good quality care or staffing levels. And we abide by the regulations of the Department of Health to be in survey ready, reporting mechanisms. You get it, right? Okay. If you get that, because that's the hardest one, the rest of them are going to be pretty easy. So now we're going to take the second one. This is number 1. Here's number 2, accreditations. Now, there's something interesting about accreditations. Accreditation. Come on. Dun, 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 dun. Accreditations are voluntary. They're voluntary. You do not have to be accredited by anyone. That's fun, right? If you are accredited, however, who would you be? Who would you be accredited by? Maybe JACO. Maybe it's Joint Commission. Maybe it's the American Heart Association. Maybe it's the, CAR for the rehab, CARH, I think, for rehab hospitals. I think it's CARH. I think that's what the organization is for rehabilitation hospitals. Now, this is a voluntary, and unlike the regulations where there are rules that you must follow, these, let me change the color of my pen here, these are usually identified as standards that we agree to uphold. These are standards that we are going to follow and uphold in order to maintain our accreditation status. Okay, so now once we understand who, and we know that it's voluntary, and we're talking about the standards, now we can fill out the requirements. What are the requirements of some of these accreditations? You might have quality requirements or leadership requirements or QAPI requirements. There's a lot of continuous improvement requirements that have to go on. But you have to demonstrate these standards that you are agreeing to do in order to maintain your accreditation. Those are the requirements. Something interesting about these accreditations, by the way, this is the only one of all of these, really. Well, registration's a little bit wonky too, but this one specifically, if you don't have any accreditations, you can just simply say XYZ nursing home is not accredited through any organization. Therefore, we have no accreditation requirements. Totally acceptable answer. Totally makes sense. Let's move on to certifications. Number 3, certifications. Certifications. Come on. No. So certifications are very much like regulations where they're not voluntary. They're actually mandatory. Mandatory for a lot of us in a lot of states. And this is also interesting. They're mandatory and they usually are earned in some sort of a formal educational setting. So certifications are, generally speaking, education-based, formal, and again, let's go to the who. Who does it? Well, guess what? CMS also has certification requirements. You have to be Medicaid certified, Medicare certified, right? Like there are certification requirements just through CMS. But there's also some dietary. Some states have dietary certification requirements where the dietary manager has to be a CDM, a certified dietary manager, which requires education. Like they have to formally go through a class. They have to get certified. Usually have to get recertified every couple of years. Some even have to have a certain number of educational sessions every year, like CEUs, right? And also staff. So of course, or the who is there's state agencies like State Department of Health, they may require that all of your nursing assistants be certified nursing assistants. And they will have to go through a formal class and earn that certification. And then part of the requirements is they will have to continue to get education every year, and they'd have to recertify every year, every 2 years, every 3 years. This is what we're talking about. So once you understand who we're talking about and what the certification means or the accreditation means or the regulation means, then you can easily identify the key, most important, 1, 2, 3 different types of requirements for each one of these. Finally, we are at number 4, the registrations. Registration. Now, registrations are an interesting one because not all, well, how to say this? I was going to say you don't have to be registered with everybody, or not every state has registration requirements, but that's probably not true. It probably is mandatory, actually. Mandatory. You probably, if you're operating any business, you have to be registered as that business. So that in and of itself, right? But let's talk about the who. It might be a state controller. It might be a business registration. It might be healthcare, like if you're selling food, then you may have to be registered with the Department of Health, that kind of thing. If you have people staying on premise like a hotel or a nursing home or an assisted living, maybe life safety registration has to be in there, that kind of thing. And so then once again, what are the requirements? What would be the requirements of these registrations? And the registration requirements are probably more like, you have to, it's a one and done. We have to register one time. Sometimes you have to re-register. I know that I am a certified, my business, because I'm a veteran, it's a veteran-owned business, and I have to re-register my business as a certified veteran-owned business. I have to do it every couple of years. So there are certification requirements for me and registration requirements for me ongoing, even though I'm not changing my business at all. All right, now hopefully all of this makes sense. And now let me show you where this is going to tie in to 6.1. 6.1, I'm going to bring up the actual application here. Okay, here is 6.1. 6.1, how do you design your key processes? This is, in my opinion, one of the most significant, most important questions in both the silver and the gold quality award application. So if I were you, I would pay close attention to this question. And let me just explain what we mean by design. I'm going to give you a quick little crash course because I'm trying to make a bigger point here. Because many times when we're looking at the regulatory environment question, I know a lot of people are like, what is the point of this question? Aha, let me answer the point of the question. The point of the question is here. When you're designing a key work process, it always starts with the need, or what we would call the objective, at the end. And then we want to go from the end and we want to go forward and we want to start taking into consideration. Write this word down. Write the word consideration down. Put it on a sticky and stick it to your screen because it is a word that is going to constantly come up in the silver application. It's going to dominate the gold application. It's a word you should be getting used to. Consideration. We're going to have to consider all kinds of things when we are trying to write a job routine, design a process, which is what this question is asking us. How do you design a process? Well, first we identify a need or an objective, and then we take into consideration, well, what do we take into consideration? We take into consideration timing, the time we have to start, the amount of time it's going to take to do it, staffing levels, staffing competencies, staffing education levels, hours of staffing. We're going to have to look at financial viability, return on investment, right? And we are also going to have to consider the regulatory environment. We're going to have to know what the requirements are of our regulations, our accreditation requirements, certification requirements, registration requirements. Imagine if you live in a state, work in a state, that it requires your dietary manager to be a certified dietary manager. And your dietary manager quits for whatever reason, and you decide, I'm just going to promote the cook. Can you promote the cook? Well, if you are in a state where they require your dietary manager to be certified, no. You can't just promote a cook. You have to get that cook to go through the certification process, right? You would have a consideration you'd have to take in. One of the things you would have to take into consideration, I keep flip-flopping on that word consideration. One of the things you'd have to take into consideration are the certification requirements, are the regulatory bodies, right? So it's important. This regulatory environment question is not a throwaway question, even though it's tucked down here in the organizational profile. Trust me when I say these questions, all of the questions in the org profile are important and they're there for a reason. And this one is tied very closely to 6.1A here at the Silver Quality Award. Okay, hope you found this helpful. Give me any comments, feedback, questions you have. Shoot them my way, Ralph@ralphpeterson.com. See you later.